Hey, good afternoon, folks. So it is noon currently. I'm going to go ahead and just keep letting folks in as they start showing up or keep showing up for the webinar. Um, it's noon. I want to go ahead and keep us going. Hopefully, have some time for Q&A at the end. And so, with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker for this month. So it's Todd Little from Florida Forest Service, and he's going to be covering the issues with urban uh, forest tree canopy throughout the state, and then how this relates to uh, basically like our region of the state where there's tends to be a pretty low amount of urban tree cover, and what can be done about it. So I've been looking really forward to this talk, and um, very thankful to have Todd here as a speaker on the series. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just pass it off here, Todd.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Can you just confirm real quick that you can see my screen still for the PowerPoint?
Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
I'm seeing your
All
screen.
right. Well, I'll go and dive right in. Good afternoon, everyone. As John introduced me, I'm Todd Little. I work for the Florida Forest Service as the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator. I've been in this position just a little bit over 2 years now, and part of my role is administering a grants program, as a lot of people know me for. But we also do a lot of technical and educational assistance all throughout the state, through myself, through our county foresters, and through resources like our statewide urban tree canopy assessment, what I'll be presenting on today. And this resource is meant to be a free resource to every community all across the state to help be a Kickstarter for your communities to hopefully get a little bit more trees there and get more trees going in the ground, provide more shade, more canopy for all communities throughout the state. So I do have a bit of a pre-quiz. I guess we can go and put the answers in the chat if everyone wants to start working through these three questions. The first one is, how did urban tree canopy change in South Florida over the study period for us that's 2013 to 2021? I guess I should have made that a bit more specific, but that's the first question. The second question is asking, how many millions of dollars in benefits per year do you think our urban forests provide throughout the state of Florida? So that's covering the whole state. That's another question I'd like to see your answer on, and I have three choices for that as well. And then I have the last question is, which communities in Florida have access to this resource, the statewide urban tree canopy assessment? And if you were paying attention, I did already kind of hint at the answer to that one, but I'd love to see what your answers are. We have the pre-quiz, and John, I think the best way is probably to do it in the chat if everyone wants to try dropping some answers in there for questions 1, 2, and 3. As they're multiple choice, you can go ahead and put them in.
Yeah, we're getting some activity in the chat here. So
Perfect. Oh, hey, John and Larson. I see a bunch of people in here I know and some others that I haven't worked with yet. If you're one of the ones that I haven't heard from or worked with yet, I'll put up my contact information at the end. I'd love to hear from you. That's the more fun part of my job, is hearing from people out in the communities, doing the urban forestry work all across the state. So anyone that wants to reach out, I'll put that up, and uh, love to make that connection there. All right, I'm seeing a lot of BCB seems to be the most common answer in there. Uh, yeah, we'll work through the PowerPoint here and we'll see what the final results look like for us. Excuse me. To start off, the big picture of this project is the goal that we set out for with doing a statewide canopy assessment was to make sure every single incorporated community in the state has the access to an urban tree canopy assessment. I like the slogan from Crestview to Cayo um, or Key West. So going all the way from the far west panhandle up here with Crestview, all the way down throughout the state, all the way to Key West. Every incorporated municipality has access now to an urban tree canopy assessment. that they can use as a resource to help guide their planning activities as a community, guide outreach events, get tree giveaways, basically any urban forestry activity meant to increase canopy. I'd love to see this tool being used more and more to help make well-informed and educated decisions to increase canopy throughout the state. I did say hopefully every incorporated community. If anyone wants to fact check me and find a community that we missed, I think we've gotten through them all at this point, any of the missing ones. But feel free to reach out anytime and we can figure out whether it's an incorporated municipality, and if we missed it, try to figure out how to get it added in there. But I think right now the count is at about 495, which is actually over the 411 technical cities we have. We also included some census designated places that are kind of on their way up to potentially becoming incorporated communities in the future, to try to make sure that we get get just about everyone some information that could be useful. What this study found is really just some amazing stats on how well our urban forest statewide is doing. Obviously, I live in Florida. I'm not immune to the truth that we do obviously need work to improve our urban forest. I hope that's why everyone here is here, to try to figure out ways to improve it. But I do always like to start with some good news. Big one, this may or may not have been a quiz question that y'all may have noticed, is $456 million annually is the estimate of what the benefits are coming out of our urban forest. The company that did this is Planet Geo, and they basically integrate right there with the iTree software programs to calculate these benefits. They're pretty well um, studied and researched to come up with that value. I think there's obviously that's just a loose estimate because that's just looking from the top down at what the canopy level is. It's not looking at individual trees, but that is a very good and powerful number, and something that you can bring back to your community of, hey, by improving our urban forest, we can help be contributing to grow this number to provide more benefits, not just for the state, but for our community specifically. I always love thinking about it as 2,400 square miles of trees covering the whole state. It's a pretty big number for me, but I think there's an even bigger number that I like to compare it to, and I'll go back to that last slide in just a second. We have enough canopy to equal to 43 Disney Worlds all across the state. Um, Anyone that's been to Disney World and walked across their whole parking lot for any one of the single parks there knows just how big that is. Imagine that covering across the whole state, and we do have a lot of canopy. As an overview of the project, basically the reason that we undertook this project as one of the goals pretty early on into my tenure here was when I came on, we had a lot of federal grant funds that had been turned back in from COVID. A lot of the grants were going towards tree plantings. And when COVID kind of shut down everything, of course, tree plantings couldn't happen at the local level. So we had a lot of grant funds turned back in, unfortunately. And when I came in, the very first problem I got to solve, basically brought to me on the first day on the job, was, hey, you have a lot of money that you have to spend by June. And I started in the end of December. It was very, very quick that I had to figure this out. So we got it done. That's how we were able to fund the project. And now I think it's been one of the most useful resources we've really developed in a long time. We looked at 4.9 million acres all across the state, with urban urban tree canopy covering about, I believe that's supposed to be 3 million acres. Not certain on that. That's a little bit of a mistake there. But what I like to look at more from this slide is this pie chart of basically looking at all of the ground uses all across the state within each community. We had 36% of the state was urban tree canopy, and just as much was possible planting area. That's that PPA acronym in orange there. So that's really a lot of ground that we can be planting trees in. That's part of what the study looked at, is also looking for that planting area. And I'll transition to that in just a minute, looking at how we can use this data to help guide future tree planting projects. I don't think anyone will be surprised that about 30% of the state is not not really usable to plant trees in due to asphalt, concrete, buildings, other unsuitable land uses. It's part of this study. I get this question all the time is what about grassy areas that the program would automatically classify as tree planting areas, but really aren't usable, like let's say sports fields like a baseball field. They actually go in as part of this study. They went in by hand and picked out each of the baseball fields, soccer fields, football fields. They did that work behind the scenes to make sure that those unsuitable land uses aren't being counted as planting area. Of course, right outside of those sports fields is a lot of good planting spaces, something that we can definitely look to encourage in the future, and that's something that's seen as possible planting area on the tool. Uh, the fields themselves are not plantable. So again, we have a lot of great information, 36%. A lot of people like to recommend 30% tree canopy. In some communities, I like to recommend more than that. I also don't think there's one specific number that's a numerical number to mean we're having healthy, livable urban forests and livable communities. So that's good news there, but also we have a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to increase canopy all across the state with that 35% possible planting area. Again, another good news piece is we have 43 Disney Worlds worth of tree canopy all across the state. I mean, this is just a huge area when you think about Western Expressway, between Western Expressway and I-4 all the way up through Winter Garden area. I mean, that's just a huge amount of space. And to think that our communities have that much trees is really great. But across the state, we do have quite a few differences. If you look up near Tallahassee in the East Panhandle, there's about 50% tree canopy up here as of right now. But then you look in the southeast portion of the state, Treasure Coast area, you're looking at about 24, 25%. The southern Sun Coast around Sarasota, for example, is 30%. There are some discrepancies there. And I don't think that surprises anyone here in this call. But we'll go over a couple of the reasons behind that, and then also a couple of ways that we're seeing a little bit of positive trend there and hopefully can improve that in the future as well. Changes in latitude, you really see it as you go down across the state. You see a lot of those southern parts really having the lower tree canopy percent. But in positive news, we are actually seeing growth in tree canopy percentage throughout those same regions over the past 10 years or so, from 2013 to 2022. We do plan on hopefully being able to redo this study with the newest round of imagery becoming available, hopefully in the next year or so. So we'll continue to track those changes over time. But I do see that as a good piece of good news. You see a lot of those southern regions, Treasure Coast, Southwest, Southern Sun Coast, East Central, kind of growing a little bit of tree canopy. Obviously, there's still a lot more room for growth. But there's a lot of difference between the regions of the state, really. I think one of the biggest differences is the clearest is you look at population density all across the state. Those same exact regions that I pointed out as having the lowest tree canopy percent right now have the highest population density by far. They're the ones highlighted in red here. On average, the Southeast has about 25% urban tree canopy. And unfortunately, with that population density, that also comes with the higher amount of unsuitable planting area. So you see from the report that we had done, that the highest percentage of land cover that's unsuitable for tree planting is also there in the Southeast at 45%. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done if we really want to get trees to grow, to provide that canopy and grow out to where we want them to be. But hopefully we'll be looking at this tool and looking at ways that you can use it to help streamline that process. And hopefully I at least grasp the low hanging fruit of the easiest areas to plant some trees, and then start looking at how do we adjust that land that's unsuitable for tree growth, and to hopefully land that would work for improving the canopy. And of course, another contributing factor that we're all very well aware of in Florida is hurricanes and other tropical cyclones. You see that this map is from the past 100 years of landfalls in Florida. And you do see even if the last few years have been slightly different, you do see a very much the target seems to be on South Florida. You see that all centered right there around kind of a line around Cape Coral all the way over to West Palm Beach and south. So of course that contributes to low canopy levels as well. There's and what we want to encourage is not just planting trees, but planting a more resilient canopy. Planting the right tree in the right place, doing proactive maintenance, trying to reduce that impact that each storm has on the canopy levels by actively taking care of the urban forest, hopefully reducing the impact of these storms and keeping that canopy strong. So while the canopy grows, it's also growing and staying in place there. Uh, like I said, we've seen a little bit of change over time, over the study time from 2013 to 2022. You're actually seeing a positive increase in growth in the southeast portion of the state. It may be only 0.07%, so uh, fairly insignificant, honestly, but it is growth. It's a lot better than, say, the West Panhandle has had to deal with a lot of the storms and development over there, losing almost 10% of the tree canopy, especially with Hurricane Michael really taking a toll on that area. Uh, but as you notice, each of the regions does have quite a bit of change over the past few years. I mean, that's 10%, that's a very large difference. The Treasure Coast was actually one of the very lowest rated areas for the amount of urban tree canopy currently. And it also has the highest level of increase over that same study period. So hopefully that means that things are in a upward trend there. The one thing about this data is that it doesn't cover all of the many hurricanes we've had since 2022. In fact, the data is pre-Hurricane Ian even. So we have Ian, Milton, Helene, really all sorts of storms since then, Adalia, that have had impacts on the urban forest all across the state. So we're really wanting to see that data as soon as the imagery becomes available to get it updated. And as soon as we do, we'll let everyone in the communities across the state know. There's also been continuing development since 2022. That's another factor really heavily weighing on the changes in tree canopy. One thing I like to look at for especially the Southeast region is a lot of it now is really redeveloping the same urban centers. So the more that we go back and replant, the better off we will be doing. It's not as much of removing the original vegetation, it's just going back as redevelopment occurs. To really get into the value of this tool, I like to look at it again as very much a Kickstarter program, to a Kickstarter resources to really help increase tree planting programs and efforts across really anywhere in the state. It's a free resource. Every community has access to it. You don't need to log into the app. You don't need to do anything with it. If you do want to log in, you can download the shapefile actually. If you want that, reach out to me, but you really don't need to play around with the data and find any of the information that you're looking for. So here are my main recommendations really of how to use this tool as a Kickstarter. One is the very clear, if you just wanted to work within the tool, you can already to identify possible planting area. We'll walk through an actual example here in a minute from Pompano Beach. I don't know how I ended up picking on them today, but that's the community we'll be looking at a bit. And what you're looking at on the right side here is that layer of what is the possible planting area? What did the AI and data recognition gurus figure out as good planting space there? Obviously, there's a little bit of on the ground truthing that we'll go through in a little bit as well that's needed before you plant trees somewhere, of course. But that is a good resource to kind of get that conversation started. Another recommendation is to use this as part of developing an urban forest management plan for your community. Whether you work for the local government and you want to try to get that urban forest management plan developed, or if you're a citizen that just wants to see the local urban forest being managed a bit better, that management plan goes a long way towards improving urban forest management. And this tool can be used as a resource to help you advocate for that better urban forest management, more proactive tree planting, developing a management plan to address both of those, really. You can also use it to start the process of developing a local urban forest tree inventory. We'll walk through in a second here of exactly why that could be so important to go that step beyond just the overhead tree canopy assessment. Helps you identify gaps in the local urban forest, helps you identify real true planting spaces as opposed to just an overhead estimate. Also helps you identify areas that have a lot of aging canopy that you may need to start planning ahead for replacing. So like I said, I have an example picking on a little community corner of Pompano Beach here, looking at this planting area that the program recognized. As you can see, there's a little bit of gap between where the trees actually are on the satellite imagery versus where the area is. But that's why, thankfully, hopefully, all of us urban foresters still have jobs, even in the age of AI taking over everything. Is that everything does require a little bit of ground truthing, but it does provide pretty good estimates. Even on the small one, you can see that there is a tree pretty much right there. This data is all at 60 centimeter resolution, so about 2 feet raster level data. So it's pretty good. It's very much industry standard for right now. But we'll walk through how helpful this can be for, like I said, the low hanging fruit, the easier spots to get to and get some trees planted in. And here's the first example is from that image. This is kind of that southeast corner of that field. And you see some of the trees that the canopy analysis that picked up on as not being plantable area. But looking across it, if this were property that you are able to plan on due to whoever owns it or whatnot, there's a lot of room for a lot of trees to go in there and a lot of canopy to grow over time. The right of way here between the street and the sidewalk, maybe not so much, with all that soil being torn up, looks like people running over it all the time, utilities, limited planting space. But that's stuff that, again, that urban tree inventory can help you identify. Is it actually a good planting space or not? And here's an example of an area that the tool clearly doesn't really fit all of the needs. And that's why we want to encourage everyone to take the canopy analysis that we did statewide, bring it a step further or two. Looking here at the site, you can tell it's very much not a good place to plant a tree. You've got storm infrastructure right here in the foreground. You've got a very limited planting width anyways. You can see the crosswalk here, meaning we're right at an intersection. So planting a tree right here would block a view of pedestrians. Obviously, we don't want to be causing people to get hit by cars just by planting a tree there. So that wouldn't be a good planting space. If we went down here and planted a tree, we'd be blocking the speed limit sign. And whoever owns this white SUV probably wouldn't be very happy with us for planting a tree there. So the big picture message out of all of this is that the canopy analysis, while it's a great tool, I'm really proud of it and the way it's been able to help a lot of communities already. It's really just a Kickstarter program. It takes boots on the ground and local knowledge to really figure out where is true good planting space, where is a good space to continue managing the urban forest, what really needs to be done there to make it a conducive space to get a tree to grow. As you can see, this app looks a lot at possible planting area, but not necessarily possible growing area. So we want to be making sure we're putting in the healthiest canopy possible, giving the trees room to grow, really giving them a chance to provide that long-term canopy for us as they continue to grow. Since larger trees provide a lot more benefit to the community. And so we want to encourage as many large trees as we can, as many mature and healthy trees as we can to hopefully increase that $456 million we get every year just from trees living with us in our communities. To show you kind of the basic steps of using the canopy assessment here, again, I picked on Pompano Beach for this one. This is what you'd get to by using the tree canopy app on our website. Basically what you would do is just pick out the community. The first, again, here it's Pompano Beach that I clicked on. And then you launch the view canopy tool. And that shows you what canopy levels are by census block groups. So that's another area where I do want to still encourage communities To consider getting your own tree canopy assessment done, you can go to a lot smaller of a scale. Looking at 500 communities, about 500 communities across the state, costs are still limited, no matter how much I had to try to figure out how to spend. And so that was the level that we could get to a census block group, but you can go a lot smaller. You could go down to census block level, census tract, which is even smaller than that, or even some communities across the country have now gotten to the point of going all the way down to the parcel level for their tree canopy assessments. I don't know how much that parcel level detail is really necessary, but perhaps going down to a census tract or a census block level plus a tree inventory that can take this management of your urban forest even further, help you really identify those areas that need more trees in particular. And so what you'll see when you hit this view canopy tool is basically those census block groups. They'll be color coded. So the darker green, as intuitively as you can guess is where there's a lot more tree canopy. You kind of see that out on the outskirts here, a little bit here towards what would I would guess would be their downtown. But of course, their beaches, you see a couple of areas with a lot lighter canopy. You also see that around where there's a lot of development. So this looks like I-95 running right through here. We all know how much development that brings right along it. And so you can see that there's a lot less canopy in the area surrounding I-95. So very much right from the get-go, you can get a general idea of where canopy is in a community and where it's lacking. If I were an urban forester for this community or a community advocate, I'd be saying, hey guys, let's go figure out how to get more trees right around this I-95 area or right around the beach area. Of course, that brings its own complications with it. But that's what I'd be looking at is where's the canopy the lowest right now? And over here, you see these slider bars, and you can actually filter down. So let's say you really only want to be looking at the census block groups that have, let's say, less than 14% tree canopy. You would just move this little circle here on the right and move it over to that 14 mark. And that would only show the 3 or 4 census block groups that fall within that filter. You can also look at it based on possible planning area by clicking the smaller radio button down here under possible planning area. And it's the same sort of thing. It color codes the community based on where the most possible planning area is. As you see here in this example, there's some areas that have 39% of the area could be planted. Some that it's showing only 2% possible planning area. So what I'd be doing if I were in the community there is I'd be looking at, okay, where's there the most possible planning area? Let's prioritize those to start. Get trees in the easiest places first, and then go back and retroactively fit them into the harder areas, where you might have to start actually breaking up sidewalk or moving or re-engineering streets and redesigning things. I always like to recommend going for the easier spots first and then going back and trying to go back and do the harder areas for planning. If you notice at the top of this page, there's 3 tools, view, plan, and grow that come for every community through this tool. So what we're going to do now is transition over to that plan tool. So what you would do is just click on that plan button at the top there. And what I want you to notice on this one is looking at the weighted priority areas that they have to consider in here, all based on census data, and I'll go through those in just a second here. And so what you'll notice on them is there's a lot of information. You can set priorities based on what your highest priority to fit trees in the community is for. So let's say you want to focus on areas that have low household income, you could set the priority there for high. Or you want to focus on the areas that have the highest possible urban tree canopy based on what the current tree canopy is plus possible planting areas. You can set that filter to high as well. Or for areas that have a lot of community population and poverty, you have a lot more pedestrians in those areas. You want to make sure that their walks are a little bit more shaded, reduce heat related illness and deaths. That's another really great priority. And all of this data is sourced from the census, so it's very good, high quality data there. If you have questions on how that data is derived, you can click on any of these question marks all throughout, and it will tell you exactly what they're using to drive that data. And you'll notice here that whatever census block group I was hovering over, I'm sure it's this one right here. They ranked it 65th out of 74 for priority to plant there based on the weight of everything there having a medium weighted value. So that one probably wouldn't be the priority. What I'd be looking at is these ones in red are probably going to be the highest priority for planting areas based on the current filtering. And to show you an example, this is with a little bit more filtering done. So this is looking, my goals in this case, so as I set everything to low, except just possible tree canopy percentage, their possible urban tree canopy. And then I filtered it down to those low hanging fruits to just show me the top. It looks like 5 or 6 different census block groups to determine where should my first 5 or 6 priority areas for tree planting projects be at. Uh, so it really brings the scale down, makes it a lot easier for you to identify those main priority areas. And then this is the last tool that comes as part of this resource is the grow tool. Uh, Up on the top part of the screen, there would be that button that you'd see for grow. And that's where you'd go after filtering down to these, looks like actually 8 census block groups there, unless some of them are tied together. And what you can do there is really try to look at what it would take to increase canopy and what are the values it would bring to increase canopy in this area. I know a lot of the trends are saying to encourage that you use economic value that trees bring to your community to use that to argue for more tree canopy, more urban forest management. And this tool gives you that resource to be able to bring in hard numbers to your city council, to your other local stakeholders that are involved and important towards urban forestry funding. You can bring this to them and say, hey, if we increase our tree canopy by doing this, we're going to be producing this much more value to our community every single year. So in this example, what I did is I set the target canopy level for these census block groups at 35%. For the example, I decided that we're only planting live oaks throughout. We're wanting some larger trees. We're going to estimate an average crown diameter of about 40 feet or so. I recommend when you're using this tool, be realistic. I usually put it at the halfway point because you do tend to have a good mixture of small, medium, and large trees. But of course, we do want to see all of our trees grow to maturity. We want to recommend as many large trees, growing trees as we can, reasonably fit within our communities. And I try to be pretty realistic. My own personal experience is mortality rates are usually around anywhere from 5 to 9%. I like a goal of around 7, but I'm going to be a little bit optimistic here and aim for about 6% of the trees that we plant to end up dying. And so what we see is we see an increase in the community's overall urban tree canopy by increasing it within these census block groups or increasing the whole city's tree canopy. And then we actually see a lot of economic values being generated through this tool as well. You see the current monetary value there, you see the modeled value, and then you see a net change in what that value would be over time. You also see air quality impacts that I think these are all great big numbers that you can throw out at, again, any stakeholders that you actually get a chance to speak in front of and advocate for your local tree canopy is the air quality changes here, as well as stormwater. Stormwater is growing to be more and more of a big topic. We keep seeing these events where the Fort Lauderdale area gets 12 to 24 inches of rain within 24 or 48 hours. It's pretty crazy. So we want to be looking at what is the stormwater benefit that the canopy can provide. This tool really gives you that difference. It looks at almost 2.5 million gallons of runoff prevented just by increasing the canopy in these 6 census block groups. And so I have a couple of links here of where to find this data. I can put them in the chat in just a little bit here, but we have the urban forestry website. That one is pretty simple. Thankfully, I've been able to argue for that for our program, and we got it to be pretty simple and straightforward. So anyone can go and view our website for information on grants and other resources. With this Canopy assessment, there also came about a 40 to 50 page booklet on the Canopy assessment, looking at the different areas of the state, providing even more data than I went through today, providing more localized data. There's an appendix in it, about 20 pages, that goes through every single community and provides the information on what their current tree canopy level is, what it was in 2013, and also in the middle at about 2017. And it looks like I have a little bit of time, so I'm going to spend about 10 minutes or so here going through another walkthrough of the canopy assessment, but we'll do it in a little bit more real time here. So I'm going to go at this point and ask someone to put in the chat community that they would like us to look at. I'll go with whatever is the first community to pop up, and hopefully I didn't mess up and made sure we got that community included. So anyone would like to volunteer and put a city in the chat, I'll be looking for that. New Smyrna Beach. All right, I like it. Let's see what we come up with for New Smyrna Beach. As you see, I just typed it in over there and then clicked on go to Canopy. So once I did that, it brings up this whole sidebar. And what I recommend for everyone that wants to really get into the program and probably get a bit of a better understanding than what I even walked through today, there brings you straight to links on how-to videos for each of the three main tools that I went through there. So I'll go and launch the view tool, and that brings us right to that same one that we had talked about. That's our very first page of looking at the community. And what you see here is one census block group really stands out as having pretty low canopy level there. We'll go and hide this, but you can see the canopy legend over here. You see it as low as 19%, as high as 69%. I would guess that 69% is somewhere over here. This census block group here, it's a pretty small one, but it's got a lot of canopy there. Looking at it, it actually did increase from 2013 to 2017, but then from 2017 to 2021, when this particular community's canopy data was collected, it went down to 69%. And you see that for every single census block group, you just hover over it, and it gives you where it was in 2021, 2017, and 2013, giving you the overall change. So this one is actually growing really well. You look at 2013, it had only 12% urban tree canopy, but then to 2021, it went all the way up to 21%. So it looks like a lot of good trees were growing there and and that means a lot more trees growing and providing value to the community. You see the possible planting area at the very bottom is 50%. So there's still a lot of room to work there. And so if I was working for a New Smyrna Beach, or if I was a resident there and I wanted more trees in my community, I'd be going to city council or any of the stakeholders, any funders that can help pay for tree planting projects in public areas or tree giveaways for private residences. I'd be saying, hey, we have 50% of the ground here is able and ready to be planted in. And so again, we have these slider tools that you can filter down. So we'll say we only want to look at the areas with the lowest tree canopy that's below 25%. And that brings us just down to, looks like 3-4 census block groups here. A couple more than that actually, but brings us down to a lot more of a easier area to look at, and can give you really those easy priorities. Again, let's say we're going to be looking for the low hanging fruit again, where's the most possible planting area. Let's say we'll look for only areas with more than 35 or so percent that's possible to be planted in. And that brings us, I mean, a lot of this is marsh area, so that's really not a great urban tree canopy planting area. That's where that local on the ground knowledge comes into play. That's why, again, this tool is meant to be a Kickstarter. But you do see that even in this one, that's very much a developed area along the beach, there's still a lot of possible planting area, whether you believe it when you drive by or not. There's a lot of opportunity to grow there. They did filter out the water, and most of the sandy areas in this. So it's not just looking at the sandy stretch of beach as possible planting area. It's looking at areas that you should be able to actually use. As a quick trick to show you how to get to see that possible planting area, what you can do is go to this sort of trifold map button, change the view to satellite, and then you click on this PPA, that chartreuse color, and that's when you can zoom in and look at what they are saying as possible planting area. Right here, I'm seeing a lot of planting area within the median. Um, of course, you see some areas where there are a little bit of errors there. And again, this is all just meant to be a Kickstarter. It's meant to start the conversation, get people engaged in urban forestry and getting more trees in the ground. It can really help identify those low-hanging fruit areas, though. Like right along here, I see a lot of empty grass that could have some trees planted in. I'll close out of that now, and we can move on. So we've got our filter set to just look at areas with between 34 and 50% possible planting area. And what we can do now is go to this grow tool. I like to set all the priorities to low personally. And again, I'll look for someone in the chat to come up with what should be the first priority we're looking at here, as far as one of these weighted priorities of median household income, population below poverty level, vulnerable population. I know that's one that I get probably the most questions on. That's minors and seniors basically. So anyone under the age of 18 or over the age of 65 is what they categorize under that vulnerable population. Ties a lot to the heat related illnesses and such there. So again, I'll look to the chat. I'll see who has the first suggestion for what category we want to set as a higher weighted priority. Any suggestions? I'm not seeing anything yet. Let's hear from someone. Areas with low existing tree canopy. I like that. We're going to set that one all the way to high. I think that's a really important one. It's really straightforward. How about one more? Let's see what else we come up with from any of these census level data. And thank you, Jackie, for that suggestion. Let's see. Anyone? Let's get one more. Low income. I like it. Let's look at median household income and set that to high priority. That one you see in a lot of these cases, there aren't really going to be that many changes. But hovering over the map here, I just happened to hover to the first priority area. This one is ranked number one for based on what we set our weighted priorities to. So that one has low existing tree canopy, that has high levels of vulnerable population, high levels of unemployment, and then you see everything else there. There's not as much of a low uh, population below poverty, but the median household income there is pretty low. And so what we can do then is we can filter it even more based on site suitability, which is again built around that possible planting area. And we can get it down to the top 2, 3, 4 census block areas, block groups. Uh, Again, this is really what you can use as a resource to go to your community stakeholders and say, hey, either we need to get more funding to plant trees in this area, or hey, this is why we're planting trees in this area. This is why we're prioritizing here. We have cold hard facts. We have good data to back us up saying that this is the area that needs the most work right now. And then we'll go into the grow tool here. And this is kind of the last level. What you can do is either set a target canopy percent. Like I said, I don't really necessarily always love that. So what I'm going to do in this case is let's increase the canopy percent by, we'll be reasonable. Let's just try to increase it by 2. Let's get a good starting point here, right? And we'll aim for more large trees than small. So we'll aim for an average tree crown diameter at maturity of closer to 35. And you know what? We're just going to go out there and throw trees in the ground. We're not going to hope for the best there. We're just going to throw them in the ground, not provide proactive maintenance afterwards. I'm going to guess closer to a 16% mortality rate on this project. A little high, but just as a scenario to walk us through, We would increase tree canopy percent. We would increase the acreage by about 100 acres of urban tree canopy. And the number it shoots out here for the number of trees to plant, it's very high in this case at 5,000. That's probably because I set that mortality so high. If I set it lower, it could be a little bit more reasonable of a number. But that just shows you the importance of that aftercare. Once the tree is in the ground, you have to keep going back watering it, keep a good mulching around it, maintain that site better, and hopefully get that tree to grow. And then we can go into here where we get that report on the modeled ecosystem benefits, all again based off of iTree data. So if we were to do this project, we'd increase the monetary benefit only about $40,000. So we have to really look at the data and figure out what are the best benefits we can come up with. We have air quality benefits, we have carbon benefits through carbon sequestration. Uh, Again, all of this is really good data, really good for arguing with stakeholders. But trees have intrinsic value as well. Urban tree canopy brings values that you can't necessarily put into numbers. As far as improving health, improving livability of communities, we always want to recommend going out there, getting the most good quality trees in the ground, maintaining them, helping grow the most canopy you can. Um, and you see that is a big difference though, just in the stormwater. You're saving 500,000 gallons from entering waterways as stormwater runoff. And what you can do then is you have the spreadsheet that it puts out. And to show y'all, I am not logged in right now. You can actually export the scenario and it will give you an Excel file with the results there. My computer may not be happy with me opening it, but here we go. It actually came up with those values. If you were to take it, obviously it takes a little bit of editing to tweak it to where you want, but I did that just to demonstrate how much you can really do with this tool without even logging in or anything. Again, if you want the shape file, if you want to log in and download that shape file to be able to add it to your own local community's GIS account or anything, that information is available as well. We didn't purchase the raw data because that would be very, very insanely expensive, but we do have that analysis at that census block group for anyone to be able to download. You just have to reach out to me and email me. So I'll give a few minutes here for the post quiz for questions 1, 2, and 3 again. Um, I don't want to influence everyone's answers, but one of them I think did change a little bit from what was the most common answer on the initial quiz. But if you want to throw that pre-input or the post quiz, what you think your guesses are into the chat, we'll go over those answers really quickly. I'll give everyone about 1 or 2 minutes for that. All right, I'm seeing a lot of answers coming in, same as before, BCB as the most common answer. And that means this is a really smart group because pretty much everyone was spot on the money with 2 of the answers at the beginning. The only one that's different is actually question 1 is C. Canopy did change across South Florida from 2013 to 21. In general, it did increase, not by very much, in some areas as low as 0.07%. I know I was mystified when I saw that result, but again, that's before a lot of these more recent hurricanes have come through, and also with the post-COVID development boom that we're really living through right now. It's the results are from before that. Not to dishearten anyone, but with this next round of data, we may see that tree canopy does decrease across South Florida again. the correct answer for that one for the study period is that the canopy level did increase. A lot of people were right. I saw a lot of C's for question two about how many millions of dollars do our urban forests provide every year. That's 450 million. And Laura, I see your question about what counties are considered as South Florida. I'll go back to that slide in just a minute here and show which areas showed that increase. Uh, but it's broken down by county and community also in that report on the urban forestry website. And then which communities in Florida now have access to this resource? I'm glad everyone got that answer right. It is every incorporated municipality. Again, unless someone wants to fact check me and tell me I'm wrong, we'll be happy to get them included. But we do have 490 something communities in there with 411 technically being incorporated. I think we've got the ground covered. But that's the whole point, is to make this resource available for everyone that we can. And to answer your question, Laura, I am going back to those changes now. Looking at Southeast is basically, I think, up through Broward. Treasure Coast is just north of that. Southern Suncoast is basically where I drew the line to consider South Florida, is Southern Suncoast and Treasure Coast South. Again, that data is still probably going to change for the worse in the next time because we had a lot more storms and then also a lot more development. But at least for this study period from 2013 to 2021, we did see some positive results. And that's due to the work of everyone that's on this call, trying to get trees out there in the community and increase the benefits that we're all deriving from trees. I think I saw a couple of people from Pinellas County in here over there in the West Central area. That area did see a decrease. Unsurprisingly, as that's continuously seeing a lot more development there. And to get back to where we were, here's my contact information slide if you want to write it down. That QR code will also bring up like a virtual business card for me. There's my phone number. Like I said at the beginning, I'd love to hear from people out there in the communities. It informs how we're running things as an agency to improve urban forestry, helps guide me on what we need to be doing. I love to be able to support and assist anyone in your communities. We also have a network of county foresters all across the state that are a resource as well for technical and educational assistance. If you don't know who your county forester is, feel free to reach out to me. We also have a map online of where all of those county foresters are. You can just plug in your address and find your closest one. Counterintuitive to the name, a lot of them cover multiple counties. So a lot of you all, especially from the South Florida area, I've noticed in here, John Harris, Laura Tooley, Michelle, I think you're still down south there. You're all getting covered by Michelle Danielson from that area. She covers about 4 counties there from Monroe north up to Broward, I believe. But with that, I'll turn it over. We have a little bit of time here, about 7 minutes, it looks like, for questions and answers. And this can be on anything with the topic or how to just increase tree canopy in your communities. Happy to be here.
Yeah, folks, if you got any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, or you can just go ahead and mute yourselves and ask directly.
Yes, I'm available to come and meet with anyone and everyone. I'm happy to have discussions and get out there in the field for sure. Jackie, if you want to send me an email with ideas or times or what you'd like to discuss, we can set that up. I'm putting some those links in the chat as well. While we have time, and I'm still sharing my screen actually, let me get the chat pulled back up. But what I'll do is I'll go to the urban forestry website for you and show you where to find a bunch of those resources. I put a bad link in my own PowerPoint here, I guess. As you see, there's a much longer website, but that fdex.gov/urban forestry should still work. A couple of resources to point out to you. They're all pretty much under the program resources. Here's that statewide tree canopy assessment report. Let's see. And my guess was pretty much spot on the money. It's about 40 pages of report and about 20 pages of that appendix that goes through each community's information. And it looks like our our system is not working very well for me today. We also have another one that I really like. This is an infographic. Um, as long as this one loads, if it doesn't work for me, here it goes. Here's based on an economic impact study of urban forestry the agency did in 2018 under Will Liner, my predecessor in this position, and now my supervisor. Uh, we worked with UF to come up with the economic value that our urban forests provide across the state and that the industry provides. So 80,000 jobs just for urban forestry. That's pretty awesome. We have about 15 million trees that are publicly owned and $8.4 billion in annual revenue coming into the state. And then there's all of this information on some of the benefits. This is an easy thing to print out and share with people that you're looking to discuss urban forestry with and increase support for your local canopy with. Any other questions for me?
I'm kind of curious about, have you done any comparisons between maybe like local code and ordinance and comparing that to basically like spatially what might be going on there and like why? I mean, obviously there's all sorts of factors that like
Mhm.
impact um canopy level
So
or that type of thing, but like is there a way to go and look at like compare muni code for some of these municipalities and see what's working and what might not be working?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So, as far as the data currently goes, it's really hard to get good concrete information on, you know, that stuff doesn't line up. One ordinance aspect leading to dollar or canopy percent to canopy percent. It's more so anecdotally, you can see a lot of those factors that weigh into it. Up here in North Florida, we have a lot more relaxed ones typically, just because typically there hasn't been all that much development. Now that's changing a little bit, and so you see the canopy decreasing a lot pretty quickly in a lot of the cases. One thing that is an ongoing project, though, is the Florida Urban Forestry Council. They're working to develop a municipal ordinance framework, kind of a model tree ordinance that is actually going into more of that data and trying to figure out a way to piece that together of what is actually working the best. I know they're at a point where they've got some good analysis going on, and hopefully the result that they get out of that will be really, really helpful to kind of guide a lot of communities across the state. But that is a project that we're funding right now.
I can see that there are some follow-ups on that
Yeah.
question. So I can see there's one that's what policies and incentives have been most effective in encouraging private landowners, developers, and businesses to contribute to urban tree planting efforts?
That is a good question. That's a
So
that covers a
I thought
lot.
the same thing. I was like, there's probably a lot going on there. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great one, Michelle. There's yeah, I think the best thing that I've found is really just sitting down and having discussions with developers. I know it can be really hard when you're going through the ordinance review process and figuring out what incentives would motivate them to keep trees on the site. I think a lot of it comes down to they just one have other requirements that they have to meet. That's one of the hardest parts, is especially in Florida, where we're sitting at right at sea level in a lot of cases. So there has to be a lot of fill brought in. So even if they saved a bunch of trees, they'd end up killing them by bringing in the fill that's required to make sure that the new neighborhoods don't flood. Um, so it's really working with them to have that conversation back and forth of, okay, you have to do this. So maybe we save some areas that we don't fill in necessarily and have clusters, little pockets of urban forests left behind, little green spaces left behind, as opposed to trying to save individual trees here and there that will die in a few years anyways. Um, Again, I really lean more along the lines of anywhere you can produce incentives for canopy retention on sites, or also, reducing the fines based on what they do to replant at the site for mitigation there. Laura, I see another really good question. Y'all are hitting me with some really good stumpers here. How many communities do not have a tree ordinance? It's actually very few. We have quite a few communities across the state that are really, really small, all the way down to the size of, I don't know, has anyone heard of Walaka? Raise your hand if you've heard of Walaka up here near St. John's River. All right. So not very many people have heard of it. Very small community. They actually do have a tree ordinance, though. Not very long, but they have one that's in place and it works for their community. Canopy is another small town that's up there near Gainesville. They have a tree ordinance. South Florida, pretty much every community has some level of tree ordinance. I think the difference is there's a lot of variation in the tree ordinances all across the state. There's a lot of difference in how they what fines they provide for caliper inch of tree being removed or diameter inch of tree being removed and how much is being replaced, what they require, what exemptions they are. A lot of communities have exemptions already for the single family residential, don't necessarily have to get a tree removal permit unless it's over, let's say, 28 inches diameter. That's more of a North Florida thing that you see. South Florida is usually a little bit stricter than that. Um, and so that kind of offsets the whole issue with that state law 163.045. Um, but then other communities are very strict and they require everyone to get their permit required. And speaking of 163.045, that's my next question there is how much of an impact am I seeing on municipal urban forestry programs? It is a tough one to navigate. It's led to a lot of challenges across communities across the state. Um, it would be hard to identify how much it really has changed canopy levels across the state. I don't know that we'll ever get good data on that because there's so many different factors playing in between hurricanes, development, everything else going on. It would be very difficult to pull out this one specific aspect. But from talking to urban foresters across the state, it does have a significant impact. I think where it comes into the biggest impact is what trees are being removed using this are the larger, more heritage or veteran specimen trees, whatever you want to call them in your community, the ones that are really providing the most benefit, providing the most canopy. Those are the ones that people are using that ordinance or state law to bypass the permitting process for. And so I think that's where you see the biggest impact on local canopy levels. Oh, another great question. I love that one. How to convince a council that oaks are not the only tree species, pines are vital to Florida, and understory is necessary. Uh, you're really getting near and dear to my favorite stuff to talk about with biodiversity. I think that's what you need to recommend is looking at basically what are the odds that we're going to have a mass die-off event in the near future of, similar to Dutch elm disease or emerald ash borer. Knock on wood, hopefully we don't have any issue like that in Florida. But we are seeing a kind of similar issue going on right now with palm trees, with Texas Phoenix palm decline or lethal bronzing, whatever you want to call it. Um, that is a huge event, really impacting a lot of trees and that whole wide array of really beyond genus even. So we're seeing a lot of palms being impacted by that. So that shows why that diversity is so important. And that's the argument that I like to lean on for that is really just canopy itself is great, but we need a healthy canopy first of all. So that requires a lot of diversity, a lot of different species out there between oaks, pines, maples. I know a lot of people don't like maples because they tend to grow fast and die fast. They're pretty weak comparatively as a pioneer species, but they grow fast. They provide canopy fast. That's a significant value. And Laura, it's another really great question on how were the Everglades in Western Broward accounted for. For the most part, anywhere that there's natural areas like that where it's very clearly trees are not really naturally occurring, those areas were excluded from the study. That's something that we had to specifically ask for. So they may show up on the study when you're using the assessment app. Um, but basically, what they did is they kind of factored those areas out, and then it doesn't play into the numbers really for you there. Uh, and let's see. Channing had a good point about the replacement not necessarily being required due to 163.045. That's another really good point. That's another challenge that does come with that legislation. Like I said, that one just does come with a lot of challenges at the local level. I don't think there's a good way, really great way to quantify what that impact is yet, but other than at the local level, I think that's where you could see that impact and really make that assessment better than I could, because it does take that on the ground knowledge. At a state level, I'm not going to be able to track individual trees that were removed under this ordinance. There's way too many of them. Um, but at the local level, you could look at how many trees are being removed under this ordinance, what's the equivalent canopy area being lost, and what's the equivalent value being lost to our community. That's something that you could definitely look at. And Richard, yes, absolutely. Counts below along the coast and even 95 as palms are predominantly planted in those areas. Yes, you see that all over the interstate, all across the state, palms and crepe myrtles, smaller trees. FDOT has their reasons, of course, for that kind of planting, but you do see that consistently is that there's lower canopy surrounding interstates. And you also think about how much clear zone they need on each side of the interstate, how wide the interstates really are. If you think they're 12, 14 feet per lane and you have sometimes close to 10 lanes at some points, it's really does take up a lot of space and then really not enough room to really provide for good canopy levels. Same with the coast where there's trees just again aren't really naturally occurring in the sand dunes as much. You get some palmetto, but you don't really get as many canopy trees, or you get the smaller ones that are a little bit shrubbier. But as far as where the people are walking on the beach, you're not going to be having that same canopy percent. And of course, everyone moves to Florida to be close to the beach, so that's our highest development areas. Those areas will be lower as well, of course.
Well, they had quite a few questions for you. So
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
pretty I mean, yeah, I'm pretty impressed by that. Like the amount of questions generated from your talk. So I mean, I think that is definitely showing of something here, that like there are a lot of questions about what you do and like how you do it and like how to how to even follow up
Mhm.
and go about it once you do have the data, which I don't know. I'd like to talk more and maybe collaborate with you more on some stuff potentially here. I mean, I know that I think you seem like you're really big into the data side of it, and like I'd be really curious to pair this up, like not just with code and ordinance, but like parcel sizes and things like
Mhm.
that. And like that could be, I think that's really just such a big problem for the section of the state that we're in here in the Southeast, that um, people are just very apprehensive about putting in large trees. The big ones have already, I mean, a lot of them were moved in development or
Mhm.
after storms, or being, like as an effort for that, or to um, I guess, is efforts to get ready for storm readiness. And so, yeah, I definitely, and I think that, yeah, there's ways to get around it. And I mean, I guess maybe that gets to more on the its scale. And so you're always having to look at like that big picture landscape scale, and
Mhm.
like where it's like the arborist side, it's like individual tree. And
Yeah.
so here, yeah, I think anyway, I've got ideas for like how to potentially tackle some of the stuff here. I think small trees really play into it, but
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to people need to know all the tools and like everything out there. And I a really great demonstration. I really enjoyed like what you had to show us here with the stuff you guys are working on.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely happy to chat anytime about ideas you have or anyone in the group. Again, I put my contact information up there for a reason. I went from a field urban forester and arborist job to being behind a desk most days. So I would love to hear my phone ring. I know that even with how busy everyone is. That sounds surprising, but that's absolutely true. I love to hear from everyone and get what's going on in the field out there in your communities. What are you learning is working best, like on the small parcel sizes? You do need the smaller trees. Um, Hear that, bounce feedback back, provide more specific information that I've gathered from communities. But yeah, I try to keep an open door and look forward to hearing from anyone whenever y'all want.
Well, awesome, Todd. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was really great and really great questions from everyone. That was a lot of fun.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you all next month, hopefully.